Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. While speaking in Bajor today, the Prime Minister, while reiterating his offer of talks to India, spoke to his opponents, saying clearly that there is talk about threat being to democracy. There is a lot of talk about that from the opposition, PPP and the PMLN. Both are saying that, but when clamping down on corrupt politicians is no threat to democracy. He also talked about the PMLN and PPP and their critique of the economic and political strategy of the government. How does the government plan to deal with the incumbent issues facing it in the near future? Let's talk about all of that. I have with me Raja Faisal, who's a journalist. Thank you for joining us today. Javed Rana Saab, who's a senior journalist. Thank you for joining us. And Dr. Abid Abbasi, who's a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today. Raja Saab, like I said, the opposition, PPP and the PMLN, the main political parties, are openly critical of the government as far as their economic strategy is concerned, their political strategy is concerned. They're also, of course, talking about the threat to democracy, whether that's because it's coming hard on them, the NAB cases that, the PPP leadership is facing, the PMLN is also, the leaderships are in jail. What kind of a strategy do you think the government has to deal with these issues?
Well, first of all, I would say the only strategy government has is that their manifesto, it clearly said before the election as well, that they were clamping down the previous governments, they were clamping down the previous parties who were involved in scams, who were involved in corruption, and their manifesto clearly said that when they are in power, they would be clamping down, and this is the only reason they got the vote for. And right now, if somebody is talking about this, that like democracy in Pakistan has threatened by these kind of things, I don't think so. Reason being, right now all of the institutions, the government, state institutions, they are working with the full will, and nobody is influencing them from the government side. And reason being, a few of the government members,
but that is not the narrative of the opposition.
It obviously, opposition, as we have seen last week, that Bilawal, he went and met with the former Prime Minister.
Yes.
Since then, there are shadows of a narrative which is being built up and which is being advocated by both of the parties, that in coming days we might have to see some kind of threats for the government. Here, I would like to mention that Parliament gets strengthened not by the government only, it's the opposition parties as well. They have to contribute to give strength to the Parliament. Why? Because any party which is part of the Parliament, it is actually a unit of that strength, and they have to make sure that they do not do something like that, or an adventure which actually leads to some disaster. And the only way they can do is they have to comply with whatever the judicial system requires them to do. And the only thing that bothers opposition parties is that there are cases pending against them, the cases which were not initiated by this current government, the cases, they existed way before, and they have to get in the courts, fight for themselves. Once they're clean, they can come out, and that's how the things should be.
Right. Javed Saab, like Raja Saab is saying, do you think that the reason why now there is this talk or a rumor going around after this meeting between the former Prime Minister and Bilawal Bhutto and his fiery speeches, his critique, his renewed enthusiasm of critiquing the government, is because in the Parliament they have been critical from the very beginning, both the parties, the BPP and the PMLN, but that hasn't really got them the kind of reaction they were hoping. It hasn't got the results they were hoping for, and now they're moving towards hoping maybe to unite towards an agitation. Do you think that's why?
I think since this government came into power, the opposition is trying to build up a narrative through public statements, trying to give threats to the government that they're going to unify from within their ranks and files, and they're going to give tough time to the government. That is something which has not taken off. And going by what we see on the ground, it is unlikely to take off.
Right.
Situation has changed in Pakistan. It has dramatically changed. In the beginning, this government stumbled, it staggered, particularly on economic front. It went for policies which probably were flawed policy, and they had little understanding. But I think this crisis with India has stabilized this government. The weaknesses that it had, those seems to have been covered. Opposition had to unify, had to support to the government. In fact, I would say not to the government, but the state of Pakistan. So,
But they did that.
And yet they did that. And the reaction from the civilian government was fantastic. The posturing from the Prime Minister was something which was required. I won't say it as a statesman, but as a genuine political leader. And he's a good international face. So in that context, I think the kind of the narrative that opposition was trying to build,
Right.
that has fallen flat. And now meeting of Bilawal Bhutto with former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif,
Right.
I think it would make little sense when we say that this meeting is going to translate into any concrete actionable political action. That's not going to happen. Now our private televisions are replaying all those bad mouthing of Bilawal Bhutto against the former Prime Minister. And then, all these incidents are portraying one thing, that the political parties in Pakistan, I'm not giving any exception to any specific political parties, they are fighting for the interest of their leaders,
Right.
the vested interest of their leaders. Whenever they are in trouble, that means the political party is in trouble. That means from their perspective, the democracy is in trouble. That means the entire system is in danger. And the entire political parties, their second, third tier leaders, they start defending them without actually understanding the nature of allegations against them. And same goes now. I mean, we can debate this, who is a more corrupt or who is a less corrupt among the opposition parties. But going by what we have seen, the kind of the evidence that has emerged, also knowing the fact that our NAB is incompetent. I don't want to use the word of corrupt.
Right.
Their staff is untrained. But nonetheless, the kind of the concessions that the opposition parties are looking for, they are not getting it. They had certain hopes. My understanding is that there was a talk of deal, and something of that sort did happen. But at the 11th hour,
It didn't pan out.
It did not pan out. I mean, there was the distrust level was quite huge. So in that context, I think whatever is happening now, these are all signs which will only bring more disappointment to the opposition parties, both People's Party and the PMLN. Now the trouble with, again, PMLN, the last point I want to make, that's very interesting. The entire party is campaigning that the former Prime Minister is being victimized inside the jail. He is not being provided proper health care. Now, Mia Saab basically wants to go to UK. He wants his treatment over there. You cannot set a legal precedent where a convicted person can be allowed to leave Pakistan on medical grounds. That means thousands of other people would also have to be allowed by the court. So that seems to be unlikely to happen. Now, he doesn't want to go to the hospitals for a variety of reasons. And even you might recall when his wife died, he did not write any application. It was the request came for parole from the leader of the opposition in the National Assembly, Shehbaz Sharif. So it seems that the former Prime Minister is very particular, very conscious. He doesn't want to create an impression that he's finding some sort of excuses to go to the hospital, and he's looking for some sort of exit. But the trouble with him is that at the same time, he's looking for an exit, but on his own terms and conditions. And that I don't think is likely to happen, at least in near future.
Right. I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to Dr. Abid. Dr. Abid, whether that happens or not, whether he does get an exit or not, Let's move on and talk about the economic side of things as far as the government is concerned. Like Javed Saab is saying, like Raja Saab is saying, do you think that the government we are now on a path to being fully cognizant of where we are headed as far as our economic policy is concerned?
Thank you very much. As Javed Sahab said, that initially the government was in much trouble to deal with the economic situation, the crisis which the government has inherited from the previous government, and due to some of the incompetency and some of the lack of some swift actions not taken by the finance minister or the finance ministry regarding IMF, whether they wanted to go IMF or they did not want to go IMF. They were in sort of a confused like situation. But after getting some bailout from Saudi Arabia and from China and from UAE, they got some sort of comfortability. But still, we have heard many sort of voices from the government, particularly from the finance minister, that still the nation should be prepared.
For
the
more inflation.
difficulties, inflation and more difficulties would be faced by the nation in
But
coming
this
future.
inflation, price hike, I mean, all of these things, they don't seem to, they don't inspire a lot of confidence, in your opinion, do they, as far as, where we are, as far as our economics is concerned?
I think
Certainly, the government does need time to find its feet. It did need time, and it has utilized the time that it had in the past quite, in a beneficial manner.
I think 7-8 months are quite sufficient time for the government to set a policy. Still, the nation does not know whether the government is going to get some deal with the IMF, or what are the conditionalities of IMF, and what more pressure the price hike in the petroleum sector or in gas sector, in many other sector. Definitely, when petroleum prices are getting rise, definitely there is price hike in the commodities, the everyday use commodities. And I don't think so. Okay, what the actual government is, we are not economic expert. We cannot give a very concrete and scientific suggestion to government. But as a political analyst, we can see that the government is not in a comfortable position to deal with IMF.
But the government says that it can't be in a comfortable position because of all the baggage that it was laden with when it did come.
How much time government needs to carry on with this narrative that the luggage and the baggage of the previous government, we are doing so?
But our debts
Definitely
are
they
huge.
are in government, and they have to have the solutions of all those problems. If the problems lying in most of the problem, I do agree, some of the problems, some of the major problems due to some political uncertainty in the country, the PMLN government that couldn't, the Mian Nawaz Sharif couldn't complete the tenure, and some of the policies taken by the government on ad hoc basis, or some of the agreement with the international financial institutions, definitely that matters. And some of the drastic measures were not taken by the government, revolutionary measures by the previous government. Still, I would say that the government which is...
But they had, but just very simply, from a layman's perspective, when the government did come in, they said they had no money. Not at all. They had to borrow, and like you also mentioned, we borrowed from the friendly countries, whoever was willing to give us money. And because of that, we were able to string our economy along. That's a reality, isn't it?
To an extent, I do agree with you, but still, I would say that the price hike in dollar,
right,
the price hike in petroleum sector, every measure the government has taken, that is a conventional measure that has been taken by the previous government in the same fashion. They have not taken some revolutionary measures that could bring them out of that hot water. Still they are in confusing position. Still the finance ministry is asking, because we know that the price hike is not very much objective, very much the up to the expectation of the people. That is much more than that.
Right, let me
and
come
still
back
the
to-
government is asking
yes,
for
I'm going to come to you.
the more sacrifices by the nation. Definitely it would
You're
be
saying that it shouldn't fall on the people, on the man on the street. That's what you're saying.
I would
Ji,
like
Raja
to
Saab.
mention something very important,
Right.
that we need to understand that Pakistan has gone through a phase of war on terror. For 15 years, Pakistan has been fighting, that war.
Right.
And when your country is, practically in the state of war, you do not attract foreign investments. You do not, foreign investors, they do not trust your country to be put in money in. we lost foreign
But do you think that the
investments.
policies at present, do you think that we are moving towards more investor-friendly confidence? Are we inspiring confidence in investors to come and invest in Pakistan at this time?
I was coming towards that. You know, in the previous two governments, no doubt they did try, but they were unsuccessful. Reason being,
Right.
both of the previous two governments, they have been going through. Still, that phase was there. War on terror phase was there. This government is lucky enough to find itself out of that phase. Now they have a chance. They are attracting, and they are attracting very well. We have seen in recent past that the current government, they have been very successful in their foreign affairs, and they have been maintaining and making and broken relationships. They have been mending them, and this will benefit Pakistan in coming future. But here, most important thing is, are we ready to revive all of the local industries we had? Why? Because in the previous two governments, our exports, they have decreased, and imports, they have increased to that extent, which is alarming for Pakistan. Pakistan needs to decrease the imports, and exports, they need to be increased.
There was a lot of talk about tax, as far as bringing people into the tax net, which is a huge problem as far as our source of revenue is concerned.
Exactly.
Do you think we're moving towards that?
We are sort of moving towards that, but I believe that government needs to take measures to revamp FBR, revamp the tax collection setup Pakistan has on the local setup as well. Reason being, if they do that, then of course they would be in a better position to generate revenues. Without generating revenues, they would not be able to run the government properly.
Right. I'm going to go to Javed Sahab. Javed Sahab, in this kind of an economic climate that we've established, that is not because of the policies of the government, but because of our own baggage in the past, whatever the government came in, what the situation was, the reality on the ground was. If in this kind of a political economic climate, there is an agitation, for example, if the PMLN and the PPP do unite, in the face of the fact that the numbers in the parliament also, the government doesn't have a huge majority, do you think that there will be problems for the government?
I think opposition parties are very wise to the extent that the political conditions are not ripe in Pakistan to launch any agitation. First, this government is in power just for last 6-7 months, and very critical point is that the government, this particular government, enjoying an excellent relation with the powerful military establishment, and until unless there are certain holes in those relations, the opposition parties usually, going by their track record in Pakistan history, they do not take to the streets. That is one factor. So that's not there.
So the whole talk of agitation is just that
you
talk.
see, there was small agitation
Right.
when former President Asif Zardari started in Sindh province,
Yes.
when there was investigation against him.
Right.
He tried to bring out people, the fact that his party is in the government in the Sindh.
Right.
So there was a sizable number. I think they have tested that.
If Asif Ali Zardari goes to jail again today, for example, do you think that there will be an agitation? I mean, considering the fact that the PMLN and the PPP are very different parties, they have a very different makeup, and the PPP is more prone to being that kind of a
Frankly
party.
speaking, we can laugh at it. No one is going to come in support of Asif Zardari.
They're in power in Sindh.
The fact they are in power, they
Yes.
may bring out certain number of the people. But I think that
But if they unite with the PMLN,
PMLN has already gambled it before the election.
right?
And the manner with which the former Prime Minister, who's in jail now, he launched campaign which was largely seen against the military and judicial establishment. I think that backfired, and he has realized it lately. And you might recall that he's not been speaking to the media for the last 7-8 months. It's not that he's in jail. The reason
Or that he's unwell.
No, I think he had realized. He had realized that was his mistake. He should have not spoken against the establishment after he was dislodged from power. I think in that context, though both political parties have been looking for underhand deals, they are not getting them.
Right.
That is at the heart of the problem. So I think these threats of launching campaign against the government, they are not going to work. But at the same time, we also need to look at some of the weaknesses of the government's economic policies.
Right.
The previous government had around 18% devaluation of rupee
Yes.
in 5 years. This government, in first 4 to 5 months, they had 15% devaluation of rupee. And that's a huge setback. It makes no sense. And then it has had a change cycle, price hike in everything, transport, you name anything.
Inflation definitely. the
Inflation is
result of
there.
that.
I think that is where the opposition has some reason to attract people. But people would not be attracted to the extent of coming on the roads. The fact that the opposition's own reputation has been very bad, they are tainted with the corruption charges, they are not being perceived to be trustworthy by the people.
And isn't it true that after the situation with India, the recent, the recent hostility between us and India, the debacle that was of course had come from their side, the confidence in this government has increased. The way that it was handled, the crisis, the way that it was handled, it has made the people, the confidence, the people who were doubting this government, who had doubts when they were they were finding their feet, they were perhaps trying when the government did come in, those doubts have clearly now been, they've vanished. People now seem to have confidence in this government that they are steering us towards the right direction.
Absolutely, you are right there. That's a point I made early on, because all the, I would say, flaws in their economic policies, they were covered with the wise manner with which they handled this crisis. And that gave a sense to the people that this government is capable
Right.
to deliver.
Right.
Earlier on, because of devaluation, because of economic policies, there were apprehensions, fears that this government may not be corrupt as were the previous rulers, but this government may not be the competent enough. But after this crisis, I think that narrative has changed, that public perception has changed. But again, economy is a very difficult game. It's not that easy. It's not a 1 day, 2 day, 3 days crisis. Economic policies
Javed,
take time to
that
take
is true.
shapes. But again, there are positives we must acknowledge, and those positives are that the trade deficit has reduced, particularly the imports have reduced. I think about their overall trade deficit is 11%, it has reduced, but largely much of which is imports have reduced. And the hundi culture, I spoke with one of the money changers just last week. He said absolutely. Now there is it's difficult to imagine about the hundi culture. I think they have put in place some mechanism, some safeguards. I think that is a very, very positive sign. And then we have investments coming from abroad. There is an impression that there is a public face. Pakistan is a better face, I would say, in shape of Imran Khan. He is attracting investment. He is also investing a loan, which obviously Pakistan needs. But again, there is a big question mark, and that question mark is that the People's Party's government from 2008 to 2013, they were taking loan from the state bank and the commercial banks, Pakistani domestic banks, I'm talking of 5 billion rupees a day. Previous government was taking 7 billion rupees per day. This government is taking $15 billion rupees per day. Which means if the speed with which this government is moving with their economic policies, with taking loan from the domestic banks, that means it may surpass the total overall loan of Pakistan at the end of the 5 years. Something Imran Khan himself was very much critical. And I think that is where the government needs to look into. What is there is something which is seriously wrong. There is a payment crisis of balance of payment crisis in Pakistan right from the day when this government is in. I think they need to focus on it, and they need to look at the bigger picture. That if they keep on taking loan from the domestic banks and from friendly countries, from the international donor agencies, what is going to happen by the time their tenure is going to conclude.
Right. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to go to Dr. Abid. Dr. Abid, which brings us to the fact that perhaps, the government came in saying that they will reform the major institutions in Pakistan as far as judiciary is concerned, as far as NAB is concerned, as far as our taxation is concerned. Are we moving towards that? Because if we do those reforms, perhaps we will clamp down on the reasons why we are where we are as far as our financial situation is concerned, our economic situation is
So far, we have not seen. I have earlier said that any revolutionary kind of, measures, reformist measures taken by the government. At least I am not convinced that.
Do you think it's because they don't have the opposition on the same page with them as far as this is concerned?
If they
do
are
say
going
that
to bring some constitutional change, definitely they would need, the support of opposition, because PTI and its allies are not having enough majority in the National Assembly or in the Senate as well. But as you mentioned in your previous question, that what actually the opposition is thinking of, definitely I do agree with Rana Sahab that Pakistan People's Party supporter or PMLN supporter,
Right.
perhaps they won't come into the street for the sake of their leadership now, because PMLN has, gauged this situation, or definitely that is why Mr. Sharif, Mian Nawaz Sharif Sahab, the former Prime Minister, he has, abruptly changed his narrative. Totally, he, keep quiet for a couple of months when, after the death of his wife. But if the policies of the government remains continuous, if the government's, the failure of the government, if to bring some revolutionary change, to bring some, positivities in the life of the common people, then opposition would have a very good room to, bring the people in the street, or we have discussed earlier that this government, for a long, after a long time, having this conducive situation that the establishment and the state institutions and the government are on the same page. Yes, the Indian intrusion in Pakistan, that aggression against Pakistan, has given some breaths to this government to take, but without putting revolutionary measures in the economy and bringing some positive changes to the common people, the government could not sustain its popularity in the people, and that would be the stage when the opposition could bring some sort of difficulties for the government.
Right. I'm going to go. Raja Sahab, why has there not been the kind of movement that perhaps we would have liked to see towards reform? Do you think it's because the government has been busy trying to salvage the kind of crisis they were in when they first came in, accompanied by, of course, other issues like political and this issue with India and our foreign policy issues? Is it that, or do you think that it's also the fact that the opposition is not willing to play ball with the government?
Well, to be very fair, when they came into the government, they hadn't had enough finances to run the government. So first of all, they had to think about it.
Right.
And second thing is, to fix that, they had to mend the relationships, and you very well know that with the Middle Eastern countries, Pakistan hadn't had that kind of interaction and relationship at that time, and they had to mend that. And next thing is, they were initially talking about the IMF, and once again they were the critics of IMF, going back to IMF and these sort of things. So they didn't go towards that, and they were looking for something, an alternate to that. So they had to fix that. After fixing that, of course, when they are normalizing the things, when things get normalized, then they would have been in position to look into the economy, what are the things which needs to be changed or which needs to be fixed. As you have earlier mentioned, that Pakistan's biggest problem right now is to generate the revenues through taxes. Pakistan, sadly, in Pakistan, people do not pay tax, and they had to fix that as well. They haven't done it so far. They need to do it. They can only do it through proper legislation in the parliament. And when we talk about the legislation, they do not have a clear majority in the parliament. So once again, they would be relying upon opposition. But opposition is busy trying to save themselves from the cases they existed ages ago. So this is what the problem is, and somehow I believe they need to sit on the on the table and talk about it. Some kind of setup should be introduced by the parliament itself. Parliamentarians should come forward to
But do you
form
think
a
that
committee.
there will be that kind of relationship can come in, considering the fact that, like you're saying, that they're facing accountability, the opposition, the BVP, the PMLN, their leadership. And, Rana Saab also mentioned the fact that, unfortunately, in our country, when the leadership is facing, charges, it's the party that is actually facing those charges.
To be very fair, 3 months ago, People's Party, they actually, said to the government that if there is something which you need our support for, which is going to be something, for the country and in the larger interest of the public,
Right.
we would be sitting with you and we would be voting for you. They did not buy, they should have cashed on that.
But that is
They should have
unlikely if Zardari Saab goes to jail. Is it not, Javed Saab?
It will be.
I think still there are options available with the former president, and he knows the severe nature of cases against him.
Right.
I, as a reporter of the Supreme Court, I have covered some of his previous case, and I understand that in none of the case he got exoneration on merit. It was either through technical grounds or through other manipulations which involve that the original documents and evidence were stolen from the custody of NAB, and I wonder why a formal investigation was not taken place.
But I don't think this government is willing to give them that kind of room for that kind of engineering.
Now, that engineering is unlikely to happen.
Right.
Now, Asif Zardari is not that young and energetic as he was 15 years ago. He doesn't have that kind of energy
Good health.
whereby he can, face the difficulties in jail.
Right.
And I think that also Babar Awan is not there with him. He is on the other side of the political divide,
Right.
telling all the secrets, mechanism with which he survived. So I think if there is a deal with, supposedly, I'm saying just for the sake of the argument,
Right.
with the Sharif family, I think then the same template of the deal would be with Asif Zardari. And to be fair with the Sharif family, the nature of evidence against him as compared to Zardari is less credible. Rather, I would say Sharif, in case of Nawaz Sharif, he was knocked down on technical grounds, first in the Supreme Court, and then it was very small amount, but legally speaking, that was okay. During trial court, again, it was under the law, it was his responsibility to come up with the evidence to prove the legitimacy of the sources of the income
Right.
with which his family had built up the assets. So there, he didn't have any evidence. In case of Asif Zardari, there is a direct evidence, almost, I don't want to use the word of direct, but it's almost direct, where through multiple bogus accounts, through multiple fake characters, the money is ending up
So it will happen.
to his interest.
So you're saying it has to happen.
It has to happen. So he had the options that he has. Of course, he would not go for the plea bargain, obviously for political consideration. But I think he would look for some deals, and there are templates of those deals. Those deals are that all of a sudden some big monies, certain number of billions of dollars, they are transferred in the accounts of State Bank of Pakistan or some other state institutions, through formally or informally.
I can see Dr. Abid disagreeing with you.
I mean,
I'm going to go.
these are just speculation. These are just speculation. Other options are that probably he will have to face the jail. I mean, that would be unfortunate for him because
Which is not the first time.
which is not the first time because he has experience, but I don't want to use the word of much of, but a significant amount of time he spent in jail, in the luxurious rooms.
I would like to, add something to whatever Rana Saab has just said.
Before I go to Dr.
Interestingly, if you monitor the programs on social media or anywhere, People's Party's leaders, they are not interested in, opposing the content of JIT. The findings JIT found, they don't have question marks on them, All they're talking about is that they did not want that case to be shifted from Karachi to Rawalpindi. Reason being, they wanted to keep it there either to deal with it or to find a deal to deal with it, once again. And that's what they were looking for. And in this case, when the case is shifted to Rawalpindi, they are not seeing that happening. They wanted to, generate some kind of momentum to
People's
counter
Party
it.
So we
is
can
the
say they
only
felt they
party in
had more
Pakistan.
options
Let's
in
be
Sindh.
Yeah.
fair to Pakistan
Ji,
People's
Abid
Party, that Pakistan People's Party has consistently faced this sort of, accountability from different regimes during Musharraf regime. Even for two regimes of Nawaz Sharif, these cases were registered against Mr. Zardari, and he was acquitted from the Supreme Court, whether it was on technical ground or whether it was,
Right,
some
exactly.
maligning agendas.
Yes.
We should honor the
An acquittal
decisions
is an
of the
acquittal.
court of the country.
Yes.
One thing. Second thing, Mr. Zardari remained in jail for more than 10 years. If he has done something, that would be according to law as...
That's also a fact, Javed sir.
He remained in jail, and he has faced every sort of, persecution against him, political victimization or media trial. Everything was done, not only with Mr. Zardari, but even before against Benazir Bhutto.
Right.
And now we all know, we are mature people, we have eye on the Pakistani political, developments. There are so many people in PTI, they have been in Pakistan People's Party, they had some serious cases against them for corruption. There are so many sort of, things which can be debate, which we can be discussed, that are, not showing the equal sort of treatment to all the political parties in the country. This has been happening in past, this is being happen even today, or God forbid it would continue for some audio. For instance, Bilawal Bhutto, he is a young, face of Pakistan People's Party.
Right.
And I think this practice should be, we also be, bit objective to analyze all these things. He has shown tremendous acumen in a very short period of time. There are so many people in,
But no one is denying that.
has praised him during his election campaign. He has shown tremendous maturity,
Right.
and
His
now
first
he
speech
is.
in the parliament, everyone
And these
applauded.
cases, when we used to say this thing, that these cases were not, initiated by the incumbent government, by the government of PTI. Yes, some cases have been initiated during this period. For instance, this money laundering, that has still not been, I'm not going to defend Pakistan People's Party much more, because I'm a pro-democratic person from the inside. I wish that equal treatment should be done to all political
Right,
parties.
right.
If Mr. Zardari has done something wrong, the system, and if we say that Zardari is a corrupt person, but at the same time we say that our judiciary is not capable to give punishment, to arrange those sort of the prosecution processes properly, the executive is not cooperating with them. But if somebody is convicted from the court, he should be called a corrupt person. For instance, so far we call Mr. Sharif that he is convicted from the court of the country. Right. And if he is acquitted from some court of the country, we should honor the decision of the court. And the second thing, what Bilawal has done, the Chief Justice of Supreme Court of Pakistan, during his hearing, he said that Mr. Bilawal, he was a small kid when these sort of, properties and whatever has taken place. We should give some sort of weight to this argument as well.
Right.
I think
Javed,
quickly, if I could add, I think we should trust the Swiss
Do you
courts.
think there is equal treatment, which is
I'm
what...
coming to that point. In the Swiss courts, for the former ruling couple, for the former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto and Asif Zardari were convicted by the Swiss magistrate.
Yes.
And then once they appeal, then it automatically gets suspended. The punishment is suspended. The Swiss superior courts were at the final stage of upholding that verdict. And in a desperate mode, state of affairs, Asif Zardari had an underhand deal with the president, former military dictator General Pervez Musharraf.
Exactly.
And just before the formal announcement of the verdict,
Was
the
it NRO by Benazir Bhutto or Mr. Zardari?
Cases were withdrawn. Cases were withdrawn. Now, these cases were, by the way, initiated in 2015 by the previous government. The investigation started at that particular point of time. Now, if we compare this government and these two major political parties, let's be fair. There are allegedly corrupt elements in this government, but the amount of the allegation, the nature of the allegation against them, and the amount that is involved against these former ruling class, there's a huge gap. And the allegation against former President Asif Zardari is that at least 30% of Pakistan's total budget has ended up allegedly
Still, these are allegations,
in those bogus accounts. That's why I'm using the words of alleged. Now, we know our system. Just 3-4 months back, a family got a justice after 100 years. It was a property case. If you have a good lawyer, if you understand the legal manipulations, and you have the political connections.
So reform the law.
So you can
reform the law.
You can avoid the real justice.
So why not reform
that's
it?
a different debate. But I think we should not.
But it's all part of the same debate. Isn't it?
We know the NAB is incompetent. We know in the past it was used as a political tool.
It was made to use as political engineering in the country.
We know that even now there are serious allegations about NAB. But nonetheless, in this entire process, in this entire environment,
but the government. Let me just ask you. This is a question that I want to put to you at this point. As far as NAB is concerned, as far as their reform is concerned, all the political parties are on one page on that, are they not?
Even the government.
The government and the opposition.
But again, if the NAB doesn't have the kind of the law that it has now, I mean, passing on the bucks on to the accused, in terms of the political.
You're saying the evidentiary burden.
Yes, that has to be on to them. Because if you remove that, then forget about any accountability in Pakistan.
You're saying, so Javed Sahab, you're saying that the NAB law, flawed as it may be.
Not all clauses, but they have discretionary powers to arrest anybody. Right. That is where the reform is required.
So there is reform. Reform is required, and all the political parties across the board have agreed on that.
And there are some
Why
sort
are
of
concrete
kind of evidences. Maro, just one sentence. And look at that. General Musharraf as having, a lot of accusation of making money across. In various countries of the world. There are so many other people, but our system, what I'm trying to establish is that our system having some sort of drastic flaws. This NAB, and this is, the burden of onus to prove NAB wrong or somewhat against democracy or somewhat using for political vendetta. It was in the hands of the previous governments. Why they didn't bring some sort of changes in the law of NAB? Now what they are facing, they
Why
are
not
crying.
do it now? That's my question. When all the political
if
parties
not done in past, that should be done now. If some sort of the
unfortunately, I'm so sorry.
One last comment. I just wanted to say something, but I believe law exists. There are a few problems with how it is being practiced and how it is being followed. For years and years of political, knick-knocks between two other parties in the 90s, and then later on, obviously, Pervez Musharraf used it as well, and he was the one who actually created the National Accountability Bureau. The accountability watchdog will work on, just need to, empower it enough.
Right.
That's what it means.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Raja Faisal Saab. Thank you for being with us. Javed Rana Saab, thank you for joining us. Dr. Abid Abbasi Saab, thank you for being with us today. As far as the reforms are concerned, there's no two opinions on the fact that we need reform, we need judicial reform, we need reform of the NAB as an institution. The laws may be draconian, archaic, but if all the political parties are on one page about the reform of such law, why not get to it? Let's hope that the political parties can unite and get to it so that we can have across the board accountability and an across the board fairness can be seen also. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.